All right, good afternoon. Please submit questions. We are going to have a friendly dialogue up here. We all know each other, and so we'd love to get some of your audience questions. I'm going to do this really quickly because we have so much to get to, but up here we have members. This is the food system stakeholders right here, or representatives. I won't give you that much pressure. But we have government, we have nonprofit, we have private sector, we have a farmer. And so we're gonna get a lot of different opinions, but how they each reflect and how each can partner to truly make a difference. So I'm gonna start with Dr. Cary Fowler, and he's a special envoy for Global Food Security Office of Global food security at the U.S. State Department. He's an amazing man. Oh, and thank you for being the man on the stage. Oh. Very nice.
Doing the best I can.
Then I have Jen Crall, who's Global Partnerships at Bayer, and grower engagement and AgriChain. And let me tell you, every time I'm in a country with farmers, Jen is there, so we kind of follow you around. So you talk about farmer involvement on the Bayer side, thank you. And then we have Sarah Evanega, and Sarah is now in a new position, and congratulations for that. But she's a vice president of external relations. I'm gonna get this wrong, Sarah. You've practiced it with me about 5 times already.
Okanagan.
See? Thank you. Specialty fruits. If you know the Arctic apple, you know Sarah's company. And last but not least is Jocelyn. She is a farmer and a vice president of GSA Farms and Glenn County Farm Bureau Board of Directors. Those are just a few of the things she does. She is also, depending on if you're from Northern California or Southern California or the rest of the United States, she is partly an almond farmer, otherwise known to the rest of us as almond farmer. We'll get to that question later. So thank you for joining us. If you could just give a brief description of what you do, your passion with gender, food equity, equity and food security.
Oh, sure. Well, I think for me, it started with my grandmother, actually. And I think with a lot of people that work in this area, you probably had an experience quite young in life, an emotional experience, probably with a loved one. In my case, it was with my grandmother who wanted me to be a farmer. She, in fact, managed the family farm, and I suspect she figured out that she was going to inherit the family farm one day when she told me the story that her father, for Christmas, gave dolls to her 2 sisters and gave her a shotgun. And that was probably a tip-off that she had something coming. But that really gave me the impetus, the emotional power to go forward in my career. Today I'm working at the State Department Office of Global Food Security. We're sort of the lead diplomatic arm for the State Department. And we're trying to work on a couple of particular programs that, in fact, very much involve women. So we'll get to that later, maybe.
Okay. Jen?
That's a loaded question, Julie. So I grew up on a row crop cow-calf operation in southeast Iowa, so agriculture.
Another Iowan.
I heard that's a theme for today, so glad to be in good company. And we moved to the big city in the 80s when folks were getting out of farming, and we left farming as well. But it never really left who we are. So I had no choice to be interested in agriculture. It's in my family DNA. I'm not sure if we study that actually, but I think we should, because I'm sure there's a chromosome in there that's tapped into agriculture. But I actually came to my current job at Bayer looking at farmer engagement, getting farmers involved in decision making, especially young farmers, women farmers like Jocelyn, and making sure that that voice is at the table through my career in politics and international development. And we now live back in Iowa, and I'm glad to be working at Bayer and get to combine all my passions into one position.
Sarah.
Right. So nice to be here, and thank you to the World Food Prize team, Michelle, under your leadership, for ensuring that innovation is part of the conversation. So excited to be here. For me, the real focus of my career has really been around ensuring access to agricultural innovations, particularly biotechnology innovations. I spent many years at Cornell University building a global coalition of advocates from all walks of life and all corners of the world, a very inclusive community of folks who wanted to ensure that the tools of biotechnology did not bypass the farmers in their particular countries. From academia, pivoted a couple of years ago to join a startup and was really pleased to be part of the team that brought the first CRISPR food developed in the US to the US market, the conscious greens. And then recently joined Okanagan Specialty Fruits, a company that has used bioengineering to innovate in apple. And there we're really focused on reducing food waste through the use of agricultural innovations like biotechnology, and also just trying to tackle the big challenge of getting kids and people to eat more fruits and vegetables.
And I'm Jocelyn Anderson. I'm a fourth-generation family farmer. I'm in Northern California, about an hour and a half north of Sacramento, so we're pretty far up there. I farm almonds, which everyone else says almonds, but about Lodi, North in California, we say almonds, and walnuts. And we also have a walnut huller, which is the first step in processing walnuts once you harvest them off the ground. Fun fact, I actually was a teacher for 5 years. I taught kindergarten and first grade, so I appreciate all you educators out there. And I think that's really come through with my passion for advocacy in agriculture since I came back to the family farm and joined boards and committees and was able to speak about agriculture and really educate those who have never been to a farm or maybe just don't know much about farming on what we do on our family farm and how we keep our ground sustainable and climate smart and the practices that we use.
Well, thank you. Okay, we're going to go into the conversation period, so I'm going to be quiet. I can do that. So I want to talk about, or I want you all to talk about, how do we empower women and bring them into more careers in agriculture, and not just farming. Of course, farming is so important, but there are other careers in agriculture, and on the policy side, on specialty crops, on the private sector side, and of course, female farmers. How would you all approach bringing more women into these areas?
Who starts?
I'm looking at you, Cary.
I thought you were.
Yeah.
Well, my most recent experience is at the State Department, and when I entered into my office, I found an all-male office. That was not my idea of how it should be, and I think we are now 50% or a little bit more than 50% female after 2 years of time. So I think there are a couple of things I'd say about this experience. One is that people who work in agriculture, men or women, don't think of the State Department as a career option for them. What does the State Department have to do with agriculture? But if you look at the fact that 60% of the women who are employed in developing countries work in the agri-food system. If you look at the importance of agriculture to not just food security, but national security, this is a place where it's open to everyone, and we need that kind of expertise. So what I say to women and also young men is think about the State Department as a career option for you. But I'd also say one other thing, which is that there are many institutions, most institutions I dare say, will have a fairly pronounced male culture. I think we all know what that means. I think we have to create a space where we are more inviting to women and where women feel better about working there. So yes, I do believe that we ought to be fairly aggressive in places like where I work in recruiting women, but I also think we have to create the kind of environment where women knock on the door and say, I want to come work in your office. And that's because the onus shouldn't be on the women. We should be creating an environment internally that makes it attractive for women at all stages in their career to come in and know that they can advance and know that they have a good professional home.
Thank you. So Jennifer and Sarah, we've talked about, Sarah, I want you to kind of talk about policy and how we need to bring policy along to empower women. And then Jen, what about technology and innovation on the high and the low end empowers women?
Go ahead.
Well, sort of speaking through my biotechnology lens, I'll say that I think we're in a really exciting moment where we're going to see increasing amounts of innovation coming forward through biotechnology. Maybe I'll take a moment to look back to look forward. You know, the previous sort of era of biotechnology, well, we had genetic engineering, the last 25 to 30 years, we really saw pretty limited use of the tool to innovate products that actually reached farmers. So 99% of the genetically modified crops out there are 4 crops rather, and 2 traits. And so many crops that are important for nutritional security didn't benefit from that tool. And I think today, as new tools emerge, tools like CRISPR or genome editing, we are in a new moment where people are sort of recalculating the policy environment that's going to govern those technologies. And it feels like every day there's a new headline of a country that's revising their regulations to, open up to increasing innovation through these tools of CRISPR and genome editing. So I think last week it was New Zealand. I think this week I saw Uruguay. So it's happening all around the world, and certainly we've seen it here in the US as well. When we have a policy environment that is enabling so that more different size companies, public sector and private sector can participate and use the tools to innovate, we see more innovations. And certainly we're seeing that today. I mean, if I look at the biotech landscape out there around the world, I think about Lena Tripathi from IITA, who is one of the pioneers really using the tools of genome editing to innovate in banana, a crop that's really important for food security in sub-Saharan Africa. She's addressing bacterial wilt. She's addressing banana streak virus, and she's serving as a role model for other scientists around the world. If we look to Asia, we see Inez Slamet-Lodin leading the way, working in rice to increase iron and zinc in content in rice. And then in my own backyard in Ithaca, New York, Joyce Van Eck at the Boyce Thompson Institute, affiliated with Cornell University, working in goldenberry and ground cherry, these very highly nutritious fruits that really haven't been commercially viable to date. And so when we have an environment where more people can participate, we have more innovation, we have more innovators, and those innovations will benefit more beneficiaries around the world.
Yeah, and I think, Sarah, you point out a great point here that the policy environment's changing, but I would say perhaps not fast enough. And so we look at the African continent, for example, and folks will say, okay, what's the latest technology that can be taken to Africa to help farmers? I'm like, stuff that we've been growing in Iowa for the past 50 years would be really great and would unleash economic opportunity for farmers, especially women farmers there as well. So I think making sure that policy keeps up pace with innovation and not only encourages it in developed economies, but also provides access to it, and even creates an environment where that can be developed in those developing countries as well. But you asked Julie about sophisticated technology and basic technology, right? And I think being gender aware is really important. And I think that's what all of us can do, man, woman, or otherwise, right? Sitting in the meeting and saying, okay, do we have all of the diverse voices around the table and diverse perspectives that we need, or do we have a blind spot? So I was just on a call today about utilizing AI for agronomic advice. And I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be amazing, right? Like ChatGPT for farming. How cool is that? And so we're doing some of that leading work, but as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm like, is that going to work for a woman smallholder farmer in these places? And so we need to be asking those questions as technology continues and advances and grows. Is it gender aware? You know, is it providing equal opportunity and access? And then some of the technologies, you know, I was in Kenya last year, and the head of the Department of Agriculture, Forestry, and something else from Maine came, and she brought a seeder for smallholder farmers. And it was very rudimentary and basic, but it would unlock and increase their planting rate of women farmers in Kenya for these small seeded crops by 5-fold, right? Now, if they had advanced mechanization, it could be even faster than that. But I think, you know, just always thinking about what's the problem set, what's the barrier, and how can we alleviate that and reduce that? It works for many problems around the world.
Thank you. Okay, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this question that you have no idea what I'm going to ask. You are the expert on the panel. It all comes down to you. You have the opportunity to ask questions, to give advice to a new small company that's in biotechnology. I would say Bayer's a large company in the agriculture world, and someone who is with the State Department. And he's not going to get into policy, but things each one of these could do to help you as a farmer. And I know water is a big issue for you. So go ahead and ask them questions and give them advice, because we need to listen to you.
Yeah, I think it's really important for farmers to have accessibility, right? We're talking about when we're looking at grant programs or things like that to help farmers continue to build their farms, whether it's adding solar panels or VFDs to pumps to regulate irrigation or transitioning to drip irrigation in order to be more efficient. I think sometimes there's a barrier to entry for some farmers because maybe they don't know how to fill out a grant application, or they're not sure of, you know, how to do it correctly to try and get that grant, but then funding also runs out. So I think we're in a space where there's a little bit of barriers for farmers at times to be able to receive funding or to implement new plans that are sustainable or climate smart on their farms. So I think that's a huge thing that we can look to for help. From other companies, whether it's the private sector, NGOs, is being able to, or the State Department, is being able to work with them. I always feel that as farmers, we're willing to work with government and we're willing to work through regulations, but we also need our voice heard so that they're fair and we can continue to farm our land and preserve our farms for future generations who may want to farm after us.
So any direct questions for anyone?
I mean, Bayer, what is Bayer doing to help, I would say, farmers, whether it's in the US or internationally, develop technology or things like that on their farm?
Yeah, I think access hits the nail on the head, and that's where I think we really look at, so we've made a 100 million smallholder farmer commitment, that we're going to empower 100 million smallholder farmers. Okay. That's a lot, but it's only a drop in the bucket too, right? When you look at it conversely. And so a big tool that we use for that is it's all partnerships driven, and it's the Better Life Farming Centers is a great example of this. So the Better Life Farming Center provides that last mile delivery, which is a key problem for smallholder farmers. Also package size, right? So a smallholder farmer is not going to need a tote of soybeans, right? They're going to need a smaller package and probably a fruit and veg and a diversified crop. So we need to make sure that our product supply matches what's needed for that smallholder farmer, and the Better Life Farming Center helps with that. The best thing about the Better Life Farming Center is it's owned by an agripreneur in that village, right? So it's a small business, it's developing the economy there. So a great example is in Indonesia. It's a different culture, right, than we have here in the United States. And there's a situation where women farmers couldn't come into a male-run agripreneur center and get agronomic knowledge in some of these more conservative villages. So this is creating a business opportunity for these women. So 20% of the centers in Indonesia are owned by women. And Bayer also has a pharmaceutical and a consumer health division. And so also in the Better Life Farming Center is your basic agronomic knowledge, but it's also addressing some key challenges that Indonesia has, like stunting and access to nutrition. And so we've done an interesting study. We started there in 2020. And of the people that came in to the Better Life Farming Center, knowledge about childhood stunting increased by 72%. So not only are they getting access to great inputs that's going to improve their prosperity and their production on their farm, but it's also looking at what other needs does the community have, and that agripreneur is empowered to bring that forward to their community. So I think access is really, really key, and something that we're looking at from the input side, but then also the finance side, we need to look at that. We talked about land rights, we've heard on previous panels. I think that's critical. We can help a farmer be more productive on the land that they have, but if a woman is having to change her plot of land year on year, you know the challenges. Like, how can you be sustainable? You're talking about sustainability practices. You know that takes multiple years. So I don't know if you have any ideas on how to be more sustainable in one growing season. Would love to have your input on that as well.
Yeah, I think that just developing practices is really important for farmers and ranchers. On our farm, I like to talk about how with our walnut huller, we are basically a circular system. We use all of our waste and put it back into our land, whether that's water or the walnut hulls and sticks and dirt and leaves that come from the waste product. So working with individual farmers, I think, is key, and giving them that help that they need. Some people may not be able to develop their own sustainability plan or look to see, how to best use their practices on their farm, and they may need that guidance and that possibly intensive guidance, especially in the beginning, to learn how to appropriately create a plan and be able to continue forward on their farm.
I'll share an opportunity that I'm excited about that I think will benefit growers and growers of woody tree species, which we work on, and we share that in common. And that is that I think the power of CRISPR and gene editing is that we're going to be able to spur innovation in crops that have been very difficult to work in previously. And so in the first generation of bioengineered crops, we saw some innovation in corn and soy, primarily, cotton and canola to some extent, and really traits that served growers, right? Which are important traits. I mean, these were traits that reduced insecticide use and, made weed management better done and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. So great traits, but we didn't see a lot of innovation across specialty crops. And now I think that what we hear a lot about is how we need to bring forward consumer traits to ensure consumer acceptance, right? So traits that are going to appeal to moms like me in the supermarket, and we're starting to see some of that come forward, which is exciting. But what I'm excited about is the pairing of those two things. And so and that's something that we're working on at Okanagan. We've got the non-browning trait that is absolutely brings a consumer benefit, but also pairing that with disease resistance traits, for example, that are going to give a grower a benefit to adopting this technology. And so that's something that I'm excited about, and particularly in those specialty crops that have maybe not received as much attention in the past.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think not having that either or is phenomenal, that you can do both. It's great.
I think last year, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN came out with a report on women in agri-food systems, and one of the things that they said in that report was that 43% of the labor in agri-food systems worldwide are women. But if you look at sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of countries in Asia, it's actually over 50%. And if you look at smallholder farmers, over 50%. And yet, hidden in that report is another statistic that I found just amazing. And that is that only 5% of the extension services are going to women. So 43% of the global total agricultural labor force, women, over 50% sub-Saharan Africa, 5% going to women. Now, we could admire that problem, or we could try to work on it. And I think the problem is more than just the fact that women aren't the recipient of the benefits of extension services in agriculture. A lot of men aren't either. The problem is with the extension service and with gender issues. But we do have the possibility now, I'm looking at Africa in particular, where you have 165 million cell phone accounts. And if you want to look at transformative change, the transformative change may come from that cell phone account, and the gender bias, by the way, in cell phone usage in Africa is there, but it's narrowing. but to use that as the extension service and to bypass some of the other impediments that we see. And that's one of the things that we're working on.
Well, thank you. I am going to go to a question. I wish I didn't have to address this question. I wish we were over this, but it's on GMOs. So I'm going to start with the farmer. I know almonds and walnuts are not GMO. Public probably doesn't know that. But with GMO crops, how do you address the fear when you get asked when you're with your Farm Bureau or any of your boards?
You know, I think for me, it's a lot about education and educating the consumer. I know that's hard to do on a broad scale, but things, as I talked about, advocating for agriculture in general, coming to conferences to be able to speak about it to maybe people who aren't as familiar with what GMOs are and how they're used in agriculture is such a great way to be able to help the consumer understand where we're coming from and why it's important that we use those types of crops. Fun fact, almonds and walnuts we don't have any GMO or anything like that, but I have seen at some grocery stores almonds and walnuts labeled non-GMO and charge an extra couple dollars for them. So don't fall for the trick if you see it.
Sarah, I want to ask you about this because you've worked for two companies. Work with one and another one that is Arctic GMO?
So the Arctic apples are bioengineered, yes.
Okay, and then we have Gene Editing was your past company.
Yes.
So how, when you were working with the public, did you address this? And do you work with your farmers to help them understand, you know, if you're going to grow this, here's the potential to get it to market?
Yeah, well, farmers have rapidly adopted bioengineered crops, so they're on board and they get it. In terms of consumers, I think, you know, the challenge really comes down to, you know, if there's no direct benefit to me, why would I take a risk about something that I've heard might be problematic, right? And so there's, you know, an education component, but, you know, when confronted with benefits, then the conversation changes very quickly. And we just launched a paper on CRISPR and gene editing with CAST, another Iowa organization, last week. And in that included sort of a case study of Conscious Greens, a pre-market experience where Conscious Greens were served to folks at, you know, events like the Pecan Street Festival in Austin and an arts festival in the Bay Area, a music festival in the Seattle area. And, you know, they were very transparent about the technology used to develop these greens that were improved for flavor. So it's a consumer benefit. It's a highly nutritious green, but improved for flavor. And, you know, very transparent about the technology. Given a salad, people enjoyed the salads, and then, you know, brought 3,000 surveys home, and less than 1% of the people made any comment about the technology that was used to develop the product because they enjoyed the salad. They saw their kids eating the salad, or, you know, family members that claimed to not like salad greens, they liked the salad. And so that benefit really overrode any sort of concerns about the technology. I'll also add that it was about 1% of people who did make some negative comment about the technology, and almost equal amount, 0.7%, commented positively about their enthusiasm for the technology. And so I think, you know, as we increasingly see these consumer benefits come into the marketplace, we've heard about the purple tomato, this beautiful tomato that's bioengineered that has a huge nutrition benefit. As we bring products like ours, the non-browning apple, into the market, a great convenience benefit. You know, you can slice your apple and serve it to your kids, and it doesn't brown when it's lunchtime. And so these are the kinds of benefits that help consumers appreciate biotechnology. Just as we learned to appreciate biotechnology when we learned that that was how we had access to our life-saving vaccines during the COVID pandemic. So, you know, there's got to be a benefit, and you know, as we see more innovations come to the fore, we're able to realize and experience those benefits.
I'm going to go to an audience question. Each one of you works with drought and the effects on farmers. So are we producing technologies and innovation with water and water conservation that benefit women? Yeah,
I can speak to it from a farmer perspective at least. So we've employed quite a few technologies on our farm. One of the things we do specifically in order to monitor our water usage and make sure we're growing our crops without using a ton of water or just the minimal amount that we need is we have weather stations and soil moisture meters. So our moisture meters, they go down 3, 6, 9, and 12 feet. We have a whole data and app that tracks everything so we can see exactly where our moisture levels are so that we can water only when we need to and then turn our water off when we have full saturation of the soil. So that's really helpful, and it's able for us to track our data over the years and see different climates or different times of the climate change and like seasons, how much water we need and when we need it. And then we're also able to, install irrigation that monitors water, whether it's drip or micro sprinklers, something that we're able to use. So that's kind of what we do on our farm technology-wise, and that's general across farmers, at least in California specifically, that it's really important to us that we're watching and monitoring our water in order to save for future drought years too.
Cary, you're ready. I was going to come to you on that.
No. Well, last year at the State Department, in conjunction with the African Union and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, we launched an initiative called the Vision for Adapted Crops and Soils, based on the belief that we're not going to have food security on the basis of poor soils and unadapted crops. And since then, we've gathered a community. It takes a community to solve this problem. Bayer has become a partner, IECA, FAO, the CGIR. There are a bunch of you out in the audience, ADM, Cargill, there are just so many. And the idea there, and it relates very much to what we're talking about here, was on the crop side to focus on the crops that are important to women. We have to understand that many of the crops, and we're very much prioritizing Africa, many of the indigenous and traditional crops in Africa have not gotten the plant breeding investment and other investments that the other major staples have. So if you're looking to solve not just the food calorie security problem, but the nutrition security problem in Africa, you have to identify what are the traditional and indigenous crops that are nutrition rich, where you could put an investment in and get a lot of bang for the buck. Why? Because these crops have never really been dealt with by scientific plant breeders. We're technology neutral in this. We're pragmatic. We say whatever can solve the problem, ramp up production, deal with the pest or disease problem, that's the way we ought to go. But a lot of these crops are, in fact, drought tolerant. I think of grass pea, which I grow on my farm in New York. A lot of them are legumes. A lot of them are the kind of crops that can enrich the soil. And by enriching the soil, we create a situation that makes the entire crop more drought tolerant. So we can go for crops that are drought tolerant. We can also go for soils that are drought tolerant.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. The one example that I'm really excited about is direct seeded rice in India. So getting away from alternate wet drying, we've introduced a hybrid that will allow for this direct seeding of the rice. And so that changes the water issue and reduces the need for water. And it changes the paradigm in labor as well, because women were mostly doing the transplanting of the rice into the field. And so that changes the dynamic. It changes the opportunities that women will have, the decision making that she'll be able to make on the farm, going from a laborer to a decision maker to a business person. So I'm really excited about the potential with direct seeded rice, in addition to what Dr. Fowler mentioned, and drought tolerance in staple crops as well.
Sarah, would you like to comment?
Well, I'll just say that this is exactly, why I'm excited about Dr. Holly Tufan's work, who we heard from this morning. I mean, she's really driving change in terms of inspiring plant breeders to, rethink what their breeding priorities are based on how are we going to serve women and make sure that we're improving crops that are important to women and bringing about traits that are important to women. So I'll just, put a plug in for Holly's research.
Okay, my ending question for each of you is, if there's some advice, and let's just make it one thing, that's actionable, and we're all about action here, that people in the audience can go do that affects women and gender in what they do, what would your advice be, Cary?
Well, I do think that we need more women in agriculture, and we have to create that space for them. I've found in my own experience in organizations that and I'll just look at where I'm working right now. Bringing in more women into my small office at the State Department has given us probably a focus more on nutrition than I might have gotten otherwise. Focus on smallholders that maybe would not be there, but it's also given us a lot of passion. And what I see in the women in my office are future leaders at the State Department. That's I think, part of our job.
Jen?
Measure what matters, and women matter. So look at your programs, look at your office, look at your recruiting pipeline, and ask, what is your gender disaggregation? And I think that will open up some eyes and will maybe prompt some questions that are worth asking.
Sarah?
I think a really easy gesture that we can all do, and we can all do it more often, is to give up our seat at the table and invite a woman to take that seat. Even better if it's a young, vibrant woman who, we heard from some young folks today this morning who thought, they encouraged us not to discriminate against young people and their ideas, and I think that's exactly right. So those of us who are repeatedly invited to these tables, we need to just give up our seat and offer to a new face and a new voice.
Yeah, and kind of along the same lines, I would say just bringing women in agriculture in general to the table and encouraging them to be on boards and committees, whether they're production ag like myself, or they're in marketing or in insurance or a loan officer for farm credit, encouraging them to get involved, and then being able to bring them to speaking events and encourage them to take leadership positions. Because I can tell you there's several times I've been in a boardroom or on a panel where I'm the only woman or one of a few women compared to how many men are there, specifically in the agriculture industry. So keep encouraging women who are in ag to take leadership positions and bring them to wonderful events like this to speak.
I also want to address that if you look across this panel, we have public-private partnerships and farmer partnerships. None of this work can be done without coordinating between these and all of what you do. So please always remember that one thing in agriculture, research can't save agriculture and global food security alone. There has to be policy, there has to be extension, there has to be a farmer involved and farmer input. So please remember as you move forward to always include all the voices and think about everything along the value chain that will help make a difference. I want to thank all of you. You are all amazing. I love working with all of you, and it was a great honor to have you here. So I think they're going to be around and available for questions if you would like later. Thank you.